Alright everyone, welcome back to another video guide on a build. This time we are taking a look at Blizzard and Ice Shard freeze build. This build is going to be more of a speed farming nightmare dungeon build where we will be able to spam everything, get really good survivability, and on top of that dish out millions of damage with our Ice Shards. We've done it in the previous video with Blizzard only, and we even were able to tweak it a little bit to be able to use, that specific build to be able to destroy Uber Lilith with a stacking of lots of different staggers and the aspect of control with some swapping. So that was a little bit difficult. This time is going to be way more simple. If you are playing Sorceress and you want to dive into the freeze build, this build is going to be for you. Without any further ado, let's go and take a look at the skill distribution. First of all, we are going to use Firebolt. Firebolt is really important because it is going to be one of the enchantment that we are going to use. The second enchantment that we're going to use is Flame Shield if you play hardcore. If you are not playing hardcore, you can use Ice Shards. Ice Shards is really good because the enchantment effect is it automatically conjures and flies towards frozen enemies, and we are gonna freeze lots and lots of enemies. The other one that we're using, Firebolt enchantment, is basically going to let us have some fire damage on every single skill that we do. Yes, every skill is going to create some burning damage except for, Blizzard. Now we will be able to stack burning, and it will be in conjunction with one of the other passives we're going to use a little bit later in the video. So let's go on quickly. Everything is in the description as a build guide that we did. We're going to max out Ice Shard, and we're going to take the Enhanced and the Destructive Shard. After that, we're going to take Devastation and Elemental Dominance, because Elemental Dominance gives us 9% increased damage when we cast above 50 mana, which is really good. This one, I use Destructive Ice Shard because it is one of the only way to proc Vulnerable State on any enemies, and it's super easy to do it because of one of the aspects we're actually using. The aspect being the Piercing Cold one, where Ice Shard pierce 4 times, dealing 24% damage. So every time we're gonna try to hit our enemies with Ice Shard, they're probably gonna be vulnerable, and then we'll be able to dish out even more damage. You can use the Greater Ice Shard if you are using enchantment with it. So if you're playing softcore, you can use this one instead. But since we're not really using Barrier and the other Ice Shard enchantment, we are not gonna take the Greater Ice Shard for this build. Then we're gonna go in the defensive skills. We're gonna take 1 point in Flame Shield with its 2 enhancement, Shimmering Flame Shield, so it's gonna heal us whenever we're gonna be in a dire situation. Flame Shield is also giving us speed, which is great because we want to get out of certain situations. Flame Shield is also used in conjunction with the Binding Embers aspect, like this one here, where Flame Shield lets you move unhindered through enemies. But the most important thing is, while Flame Shield is active, the enemies get immobilized. They are getting immobilized while we pass through them when we have our shield, so it creates another state for damage opportunities, which is what we're looking for. Then we're going to put points into Teleport with the enhanced version and the Shimmering one. Shimmering to be able to get 30% damage reduction, and this one to be able to decrease the cooldown of Teleport, which is never bad. The cooldown always procs whenever you hit enemies, and we are using it in conjunction with the unique Raiment of the Infinite, where after using Teleport, close enemies are pulled together and they are stunned on top of that. So keep that in mind because it is the best in slot for what we're gonna do. I did not put any point in Ice Armor because of a certain other skill that I'm using. I'll get back to this a little bit later, but we do take Frost Nova with normally the enhanced and the vulnerable one with Mystical Frost Nova. This is a staple of any freeze build and any other build for the Sorceress because it procs vulnerable every time you use it. This time we are also using it in conjunction with the Frost build aspect, where we gain another Frost Nova charge, but the cooldown is increased by between 40 and 30%. This one being 33%, which is not bad. Defensive skills. So we are trying to get more and more cooldown reduction, and being able to nullify a cooldown is really good. That's why we have 3 points in them. In conjurations, they are not using any of the skills, but we are getting aligned the element for damage reduction with protection. Whenever you use a cooldown, so any cooldown that we use, meaning defensive skills, Teleport, Flame Shield, all of these that have a cooldown, will grant us a barrier for maximum life 3000 for me for 2 seconds, which is good for, you know, anything that's survivability. Then we're going to go down. We are going to take Blizzard with the enhanced Blizzard for increased frozen time, plus Mage's Blizzard for whenever we cast it over 50 mana, the duration is increased by 4 seconds. So this is really, really good because this is usually 8 seconds. It's then going to be 4 added whenever we do over 50 mana, 12 seconds total. But the really, really great thing about Blizzard is the fact that it's not going to make the actual damage from the build, but the damage is going to come from the aspect that we're using with Blizzard, which is Glacial. Glacial, basically what it does is every time we use Blizzard, there are going to be spikes, ice spikes coming out of the ground, basically doing damage every time. They say also that ice spikes deal 33% increased damage to frozen enemies. And since the chill is going to be added up constantly with Blizzard, especially being on a 12 not even cooldown, but 12-second overtime damage, it's going to put a lot of chill and it's going to froze a lot of enemies. On top of that, we do have Frost Nova that we've put some points earlier in, and it's also going to freeze the enemies, so we're going to get even more damage out of this. This one is really, really important to have lots of high damage on the spike, because if you have a low roll on your aspect, you are not going to make that much of damage. So we are reliant on having the most amount of spike damage in this build in conjunction with the Ice Shard. We're going to take a look at it a little bit later on, but these two together are going to make a big difference. Also, what's really important to use in conjunction with Glacial aspect is the aspect of Frozen Tundra, which says that while Deep Freeze is active, exploding ice spikes from the area dealing 1100 damage. So basically the same thing as when we use Blizzard, but the really important thing is the second part of this aspect, where it says your ice spikes have a 50% increased explosion radius, meaning that even when we are using the Blizzard spikes, they are also getting the benefit from the Frozen Tundra aspect. This is huge. This is why we are using them in conjunction. Even though we're not using Deep Freeze a lot, we can still benefit from the second part of that aspect. You could even, if you want, take the actual Deep Freeze off completely. Don't even put a point in there and use Barrier instead for more barriers and some survivability. But this one, I like it very much because it is 40-second cooldown, but at the same time it procs the Deep Freeze ice spikes, and on top of that you get immune for about 4 seconds, which is not negotiable in hardcore, because you have time to get your flame shield back in some cases. Also, while we are using the elemental attunement right here, we actually get even less cooldown, even more cooldown reduction on some of those defensive skills, which can make the difference between making it alive and losing your character, which is really important in my opinion. Then again, these two are really important because we are using a lot of ice spikes in there. We are also going to use Prodigy's aspect to be able to get us mana back every single time we use cooldown. So we have 2 times Frost Nova, we have Flame Shield, and we have Teleport. Every time we use any of these, we get 25 mana back, which is again not negotiable because is mana hungry very much. So just to finish this, we're going to use the Ice Veil here for 5% more duration, but more importantly, just to be able to get Cold Front, where when we have a barrier active, we apply 24% more chill, and Blizzard actually gives a lot of chill, and whenever they are continuously chilled, we proc another damage bucket, as they call it, so we'll be able to do even more damage a little bit later on. That's great. And most importantly, we are going to take 1 point in Inner Flame to be able to unlock Devouring Blaze, which states that you deal 30% increased critical strike damage against burning enemies. If they are also immobilized, this bonus is increased to 75%. 75% is amazing critical strike damage, because not only we are going to immobilize them with Flame Shield, but also while they are stunned from the Raiment and our Teleport, they are not moving, so they're also immobilized, and we'll also get that 75% damage, critical strike damage increase, which is great. I've put 1 point in Deep Freeze. You can put another point in barrier instead if you feel like it. I really like the fact that I can come in, use my spell, then use Deep Freeze and come out of any situation, because it's really good for, you know, this playstyle that I'm using. At the end, we are going to use Shatter, because after freeze expires, the enemy explode for 25% of their damage. Since we are creating so much chill, enemies are actually going to be frozen all the time, and whenever the freeze expire, they actually burst out into more damage, 25% of their damage dealt, which is good because it's going to basically spread out the damage that you're making. You could also use Avalanche for the passive, not the passive, for the Ice Shards active that you are using. If you are in softcore, maybe you can use this one too, because not only Avalanche is going to be good for Ice Shards, but it's also going to proc on Blizzard. The thing is, with Blizzard, like we said earlier, we are not really using Blizzard for the actual damage it does, but for more the actual aspect that it's proccing the ice spikes out of them. And then in conjunction with the Deep Freeze one, the Frozen Tundra aspect, it will also have a bigger radius, so it will make even more damage. That's why I'm not using Avalanche, I'm using more Shatter to be able to get that AoE damage more and more. Don't forget, this build is more of a... Currently, I run around level 50, tier 50, sorry, Nightmare Dungeon Sigils, so I can upgrade my Paragons and get a little bit higher into my damage. For Paragons, let me give you guys an overview of what we are using really quickly. We are using the Glyph Socket Elementalist on the first board to be able to get non-physical damage, but more importantly, the dealing of fire, cold, and lightning damage increases by 5% for every element. Since we have fire damage from our enchantment and flame shield, we have ice, frost damage from Blizzard, Ice Shard, and Deep Freeze, and we also have electricity from the actual attacks we do with teleport. When we stun them, we get 15% increased damage that stacks overall. It's great. Second board is going to be the Icefall board, and we are going to use the Glyph Socket Destruction for 51% critical strike damage with core skills. Since we are using a lot of Ice Shard, this is going to be great. Actual bonus you get is critical strike increases all damage the enemy takes from you by 2 seconds for 10 seconds up to 12%. So, meaning every time we do a critical strike with, you know, Ice Shard, and we're going to do a lot of them because we are stacking a lot of different attacks. With these Ice Shard, they fly like a freaking machine gun. We are basically getting that 12% uptime really high. On top of that, that critical strike damage, 51%, is amazing on the damage meter we can do. The third board is going to be the Frigid Fate. We're not going to use it, but we are taking the Glyph Tactician to be able to get, you know, more bonus on the rare nodes we are using, the rare nodes being vulnerable damage. So as you can see here, it gets 19.5% increased vulnerable damage, which is really great. It's basically like having another ring with vulnerable damage on it. 20% is really good. This one, Cold Resist, I'm not really fond of it, but it comes with it. And you deal increased damage for 4 seconds after casting a defensive skill. We are using a lot of defensive skills, so this is going to proc always. In this board, I suggest you to go and pick up also the other vulnerable damage rare node, which is really good, and the magic node also for the damage on vulnerable. These are amazing buckets of damage. They are the biggest damage multipliers in the game. So the most amount of vulnerable damage you can stack, you should, because you are going to be very high damaging individual. And then on the fourth board, we are going to use the Static Surge board. We are not using the legendary node, sorry. And we are going to use the exploit glyph. Once again, 34.8% vulnerable damage. It is very good. Gives us a lot of damage opportunity. Dealing damage to a vulnerable enemy increases your damage by 1% for 6 seconds, up to 10%. Since we're doing vulnerable with Frost Nova, 2 stacks, and Ice Shards, every time we hit an enemy with 4 or 5 Ice Shards, they get vulnerable. We are gonna proc also this multiplier very often. I took here the damage to stunned enemies because we are stunning them with our teleport. So you take them 3 times in the board. Really important to get them all, because 90% more damage on rare nodes is actually very good. The next board is going to be the Burning Instinct. Once again, we're not using it. We're just using it as a stepping stone to be able to get 6 boards. At the end, this one, we are taking the Control Glyph This glyph gives us crowd control enemy damage, which is, you know, this is the only thing we do with this with this actual build. And on top of that, you deal 10% increased damage to slowed or chilled enemies, and instead 20% increased damage to stunned or frozen. And since we do chilled, frozen, and stunned, we get the benefit from everything. Really great glyph on this one. And on our last board, we are going to use Flame Feeder for 77% damage burning enemies. Since we are burning all the enemies because of the Firebolt enchantment that we are using, the 77% proc damage to burning enemies is always going to be there too. And also you deal another 10% increased direct damage to burning enemies. This one is multiplicative because there's an X right around it. In the rare nodes, I've took these two here, but at the 6th Paragon board, it's really hard to actually meet the requirements for the last bonus. So I don't really care about these. I could even take them off and go back down and find even better ones. So maybe if you want more damage reduction, we take these one here. Probably not these ones because they don't take anything in consideration. These ones are a little bit too out of the way. Maybe if we can get, you know, vulnerable damage. There's not even vulnerable damage here, so we don't really care. So this is the actual build for the last aspects that we haven't taken into consideration. I took, the disobedience just to be able to get more and more damage reduction because we are going to be in the fray of the fight. For potion capacity, damage reduction, and you can change the total armor for other damage reduction because stacking damage reduction percentage is also very OP. In the weapon slot, we are using the control aspect of control, where we deal 32% more damage to immobilized enemies or frozen enemies, which we do since they get immobilized and frozen from our teleport and from our Frost Nova and Blizzard. On top of that, we are using Storm Swell aspect, where we deal another, again, 19% increased damage to vulnerable enemies while we have a barrier on. What I can suggest you is to stack cooldown reduction on your focus. You can have cooldown reduction in the 4th line stat. You can get cooldown reduction in the first 3 stats. Then you do it again. And you can also have cooldown reduction on your helm. So you have 4 slots of cooldown reduction you can get. Try to stack them the most amount you can because it's going to make a big difference in when you can cast your defensive skills, which is going to be very helpful. I hope you guys liked this video. In the meantime, also throughout the video, you saw some different damage opportunities in the actual tiers that I was doing. I think it was 54, 53. This one is used, like I said, for more of a fast running build. It's not meant for like, big single target DPS, but it's still very good at melting like bosses, because even though it takes around like 12 seconds for the full meter stagger meter to come in, we get enough defensive skills and defensive opportunities to stack all the stagger, and when it's all stacked, just rushing them down with our Ice Shards and with our Blizzard Ice. So my name is Ghost of Seas. I hope you like this kind of content. Please, if you did like this, leave a like, a comment, and a subscription. Tell me about your builds. Tell me what's wrong with this one, and let's have a discussion about it. You have a nice day. Peace!